Mom, we've decided it's better if you watch the wedding online. I reread the line not because I didn't understand it, but because my brain refused to accept it. A single sentence buried in a plain text email had quietly detonated everything I thought I knew about my role in my daughter's life. I sat frozen at my dining table, the glow of the laptop screen casting a pale light across a half-full cup of coffee. It was just past 7 a.m. on a Wednesday I'll never forget. My name is Linda Barrett. I'm 61 years old, and I've lived in Centennial, Colorado for over 2 decades. I work as an office administrator at a local law firm, a position I've held for more than 20 years. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady. And in my life, steadiness has always been a luxury. I became a widow at 43 when my husband passed away unexpectedly. Since then, I've focused every ounce of my energy on raising my children. Rachel, now 34, and Brian, 30. I made it my mission to ensure they never felt the kind of fear I lived with in my younger years. A few weeks ago, Rachel and I were on the phone finalizing details for her wedding in Santa Barbara. I had already contributed $28,000 to help her secure the venue, book her photographer, and pay the deposit on the florist she'd been dreaming of since college. We laughed, talked about color palettes, and even debated menu choices. So when her email arrived, no subject line, just her name. I opened it with a smile, expecting a sweet update or a question about the cake. Instead, it began coldly, Mom. Not hi Mom or dear Mom, just Mom, like I was being listed on a form. The message was clear due to limitations set by Jason's family. Her fiancé, my physical presence at the wedding, had become an inconvenience. They wanted to keep the ceremony intimate, and I was being asked to watch the event via live stream. Rachel included a Google Meet link and wrote, "Should feel just like being there." LOL. That LOL stuck in my throat like a splinter. The message didn't carry malice, it was worse. It carried indifference. I didn't respond right away. I sat still, watching the cursor blink back at me, waiting for my reply. The house around me was quiet, but my mind was suddenly loud with memories, disappointments, and the slow realization that I was being edged out of something I helped build. Finally, I typed 4 words. All right. Wishing you well. No emotion, no fight. Just a quiet withdrawal. And deep down, I knew those 4 words would echo louder than any argument ever could. The drive to work that morning was almost automatic. Left turn out of the neighborhood merge onto I-25 exit near the courthouse. I didn't notice the blooming trees, didn't register the early spring sunlight breaking through the clouds. My mind kept looping the same question. How did we get here? For over 2 decades, I've shown up every weekday at Chase & Hillman LLP, the law firm where I manage operations. I've seen partners retire, interns become associates, and the waiting room furniture change 3 times. Through all the firm's growth, I was the one who made sure the coffee machine worked, the payroll went out on time, and the lights stayed on during snowstorms. But outside the office, I was someone else entirely. I was the mother who held the household together after Tom, my husband, passed unexpectedly. I was the woman who learned how to fix leaking faucets and file insurance claims on her own. I skipped every vacation, put off every luxury. All because I believed that making life easier for Rachel and Brian was the most sacred duty I had left. When Rachel switched majors twice in college, I didn't flinch. I paid for the extra credits. When she landed a temporary job in Chicago, I covered her moving expenses, her deposit, and even her first month's rent. I flew out to be with her when her heart was broken by someone she thought was the one. I sat in her kitchen, which smelled unfamiliar, and made the same chamomile tea I used to when she was a child with nightmares. And Brian, when he wanted to buy a home with his partner 2 years ago, I co-signed the mortgage and gave him $15,000 toward the down payment. Not because he asked. He didn't have to. I never tallied the hours, the dollars, or the holidays I gave up. That's what mothers do, right? We give until the seams wear thin. We push through exhaustion. We believe that love is shown in doing, in giving, in showing up, even when we're not asked. But that email from Rachel, it changed something. It made all of it feel transactional, like I had been useful and now that usefulness had an expiration date. Like I was a support beam that was no longer needed once the house had been built. At the office, my boss Frank stopped by my desk with his usual morning latte for me, extra foam, no sugar. He looked at me and said, "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I opened my mouth to answer. I wanted to say my daughter disinvited me from her wedding, but instead I lied. Just didn't sleep well. He didn't press, just left the coffee and moved on. That small kindness nearly undid me. Because in a world where I felt invisible, someone still noticed I was there. By lunchtime, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Rachel's name lit up the screen again and again, texts, missed calls, one voicemail after another. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not because I was angry. Not even because I was hurt. But because I was done. I sat at my desk, slowly sipping the latte Frank had left for me earlier, letting the warmth soak through my fingers. I stared out the window and thought, maybe it's time to stop being the one who always picks up. Maybe silence is the only language left that they'll actually hear. That afternoon, I made a quiet decision. No grand speech, no emotional confrontation, just a shift, a still, steady shift in direction. When work ended, I didn't drive home. I went instead to Mountain Valley Credit Union, just 3 blocks down from the office. The parking lot was half empty, and the air smelled like wet pavement from a recent drizzle. Inside, Glenn, the branch manager I'd worked with for years, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Barrett?" He smiled, standing up from his desk. "What can I do for you today?" I sat down, set my purse beside my chair, and said in a voice even I barely recognized, "I need to cancel a pending transfer." He blinked. "Which one?" "The one going to," I paused, then exhaled, "the wedding venue in Santa Barbara." He frowned. "That's a large one, isn't it? 45,000? "Yes," I said, "that's the one." He hesitated. "There might be a cancellation fee depending on the timeline, but may I ask what changed?" "The invitation," I said plainly. "I'm no longer welcome." That caught him off guard. He looked at his screen, typed a few commands, then nodded. "You're lucky. It hasn't been processed yet. Just in time." He looked back at me more softly this time. "Are you sure, Mrs. Barrett?" I nodded, "I'm sure." By the time I signed the cancellation forms, I felt something loosen in my chest, like I could finally breathe after holding it in for far too long. I had already given Rachel $28,000. This next payment would have brought the total to $73,000 for a wedding I wouldn't even be attending. As I left the bank and walked back to my car, my phone buzzed again. Another missed call from Rachel. One voicemail played automatically over my car's speaker. "Mom, please don't do this." I turned the phone off. That night, I opened a bottle of red wine I'd been saving for Thanksgiving, the same one I never opened because Rachel canceled last minute. Work, she had said. I took the glass to the porch and sat under the early evening sky. Everything around me felt still, quiet. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to call. I wasn't bracing for the next request. I was just there, whole. And finally, choosing myself. The doorbell rang just past 9 p.m. I was still on the porch swirling the last of my wine when I heard it. I thought about ignoring it. The house was dark, the porch light dim. But curiosity, along with the years of being the person everyone turned to, got the better of me. It was Brian. Still in his work clothes, tie-loosened sleeves, rolled up phone in one hand, like it might protect him from whatever he expected to face inside. "Mom," he said, stepping through the door before I could even say hello. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Rachel's freaking out." I closed the door calmly behind him. "Nice to see you too," I said. He was already pacing, voice tight with frustration. "She says you're not coming to the wedding now. That you canceled the money. Are you serious?" I didn't flinch. "She told me I wasn't invited. So yes, I'm serious." Brian stopped in his tracks. "Come on, Mom. You know how Jason's parents are. They're footing most of the bill and they're traditional. I raised an eyebrow. Traditional, I gave her $28,000, Brian. I was about to send 45,000 more. That's not tradition. That's being used. He went pale. Wait, 45,000 more. You were sending that much. Was I said calmly, placing my empty glass in the sink. But not anymore. Brian rubbed his face the way he did when he was overwhelmed as a teenager. They're counting on that money. The venue, the food. Not my responsibility anymore, I said. His voice grew louder. Of course it's your responsibility. She's your daughter. I turned to him steady and unshaken. And I'm her mother. A mother who was told she's better off watching from a screen. He threw up his hands. You always make everything about yourself. That was it. That was the moment something inside me stopped bending and snapped back into place. Get out of my house, Brian. He stared at me like he hadn't heard me correctly. You heard me, I said again, firmer this time. Get out. Mom. No, I said, my voice soft but final. I have given everything I have, my time, my money, my energy. I have loved you both beyond reason. And I'm done being cast as the villain in a story I wrote with love. He looked at me for a second longer. Then he turned and left. The door clicked shut behind him. Not a slam, just a small clean end to a moment that had been years in the making. And you know what? I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I woke up the next morning before sunrise. For once, it wasn't anxiety that stirred me from sleep, it was clarity. The house was quiet and the sky outside was still that deep early morning blue. I brewed a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, letting the steam rise around me like fog lifting from a lake. I opened my phone expecting a few messages. There were 43. Most were from Rachel, a few from Brian. The tone had shifted overnight. It wasn't just frantic anymore, it was strategic. Mom, we need to talk. This is childish. The venue says the balance wasn't paid. They're threatening to cancel. Jason's parents are furious. They say this proves everything they suspected about you. Why are you doing this to me? That last one made me pause, not because I didn't know the answer, but because it was so clear that she didn't. Rachel had lived a life cushioned by my sacrifice. Rent paid without delay, tuition covered without complaint, emotional support that never came with a price tag. I made it easy for her to never ask where the comfort came from. She grew up thinking stability was a given, not a gift. And now that the money had stopped flowing, she was panicking not because she missed me, but because she missed the convenience. Later that morning, while I was reviewing vendor contracts at my desk, another email popped up in my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Please don't ruin my wedding. No greeting, no apology." Inside the message began, "I know you're upset about the live stream thing, but this is too far. We lost the venue deposit. If we don't pay the rest by end of day Paris time, the caterer walks too. Jason's parents are beyond upset. They say you've made this all about yourself." And then came the line that crystallized everything. "We can talk about you attending the ceremony, but we need the funds first." So now, my attendance was a bargaining chip. My presence, once dismissed as optional, was suddenly up for discussion if I handed over the money. Not because they wanted me there, but because they needed something. I closed the email and turned back to my work. No reply. No emotion. That afternoon, Frank appeared at my office door. "Lunch?" he asked. "That new Italian place around the corner?" Normally, I would have declined, but something in me, something newly awake, told me to say yes. Over a simple meal of pasta and sparkling water, he talked about his grandkids, the joy and exhaustion of chasing toddlers around a backyard. Then he looked at me and said gently, "Forgive me, Linda, but you seem lighter today." And for the first time in years, I let the truth out. I told him everything: the email, the disinvitation, the money, the silence. He listened without interruption, without judgment. When I was done, he reached across the table and said, "Sometimes the hardest part of love is knowing when to draw a line, especially with the people we've given the most to." I nodded, because I knew he was right. That evening, I pulled into the driveway just as the porch light clicked on. It had been a long day, emotionally exhausting, but strangely grounding. I was beginning to feel the weight lift not all at once, but piece by piece. I gathered my bag from the passenger seat and started up the steps, but stopped short when I saw someone sitting there. It was Jessie. She stood quickly when she saw me brushing imaginary dust from her coat. "Mrs. Barrett," she said softly. I hadn't seen Rachel's best friend from middle school in years. Jessie had spent so many weekends in our home baking cookies with Rachel giggling in sleeping bags, watching old movies on VHS. Back then, she was like a second daughter. "It's all right," I said, unlocking the door. "Would you like to come in?" She nodded. Inside, I put the kettle on. She stood awkwardly by the kitchen island, eyes flicking over the walls like they were trying to find echoes of the past. I turned and asked gently, "Rachel sent you?" Jessie didn't respond right away. Then finally, "She's a mess. They lost the venue. The florist backed out. Jason's parents are threatening to cancel the whole thing." I didn't say a word. I placed 2 mugs on the counter. Jessie continued. "She's panicking. She knows she messed up. She just doesn't know how to fix it." I poured the tea. "Is that why you're here?" I asked. "To fix it." "No," Jessie said. "I'm here to ask you something." She took a deep breath. "Is there anything she can say or do that would change your mind?" I paused. Would an apology undo the hurt of being excluded, of being treated like a bank account with a pulse? I looked at Jessie, still young, still hopeful, and I said it as clearly as I could. "No, there isn't." Her shoulders dropped slightly. "Not even if she apologizes," she asked, barely above a whisper. I handed her the tea and replied, "Words are easy, Jessie, especially when people are desperate. But people who love you, they don't wait until you cut them off to finally see you." She looked down into her tea, nodding slowly. "I get it," she said. "Even if she doesn't." "You don't need to apologize," I told her. We stood in that still kitchen for a long moment, 2 women separated by decades, but connected by a truth that doesn't age. Sometimes love has limits. Jessie didn't stay long. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just hugged me gently like she understood and stepped back into the night. I watched her walk down the front path, and when the door clicked shut behind her, I felt something final. Not like an ending, but like a quiet beginning. The wedding didn't happen, not the way they had planned. They scrambled, of course, tried to find a new venue, called in favors, but everything in Santa Barbara was either already booked or far too expensive without the money I had once promised. In the end, they held a small backyard ceremony, attended only by a few of Jason's relatives and some local friends. There were no flowers from the dream florist, no catering from the 5-star kitchen Rachel had gushed about. Just folding chairs, homemade food, and polite smiles. I wasn't invited, and this time I didn't need to be. In the weeks that followed, Rachel sent me one last email. It was long, emotional. The kind of message that teetered between apology and excuse. She wrote things like, "I didn't mean to hurt you. Jason's mom was pushing for a certain image. I just wanted everything to be perfect." And then, of course, "I still don't understand why you did what you did." I read it once, then clicked archive. Not delete because I didn't need to erase it, but I didn't need to carry it either. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. There's a strange peace that comes when you let go, not in rage, not in revenge, but in clarity. When you stop explaining, stop trying to prove your worth to people who never questioned your sacrifices, only your boundaries. For the first time in decades, I began waking up without bracing for another ask, another guilt-laced message, another favor disguised as love. I made a new rule for myself, simple but firm. If my presence is negotiable, then so is my effort. That shift changed everything. I still go to work every day at Chase and Hillman, but now I leave on time. I read novels again, not just utility bills. I joined a local pottery class. I have dinner with friends, women who see me as a person, not as a provider. We laugh about silly things. We toast over cheap wine. And not once has anyone tried to buy my loyalty with a thank you card. It's funny what you learn when you finally step out of the role you were cast in your whole life. I thought being a mother meant giving everything always. No limits, no questions. But now I know. You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. And sometimes the strongest kind of love, the one that truly heals, is the love you finally choose to give to yourself. It's surprising how quiet a life can become when the noise of obligation fades. The absence of Rachel's calls, of Brian's late-night texts, of questions like, "Can you help with this?" or "Do you mind covering that?" all of it created a stillness I hadn't known I needed. I wasn't drowning in silence. I was floating in it. And slowly I began to hear myself again. For the first time in a long while, I started asking questions that had nothing to do with anyone else. What do I enjoy? What do I want? Who am I now that I'm no longer someone's emergency contact? I didn't have all the answers, but I started small. One Saturday morning, I wandered into a local pottery studio near downtown Centennial. The air smelled like clay and coffee. I signed up for a beginner's class on a whim. My hands were clumsy, my bowl was lopsided, but it didn't matter. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was just there to be. It felt strange reclaiming space for myself without asking permission. There were moments, of course, when old guilt tried to creep in. Like when I saw wedding photos of Rachel online, posed and polished, filtered just right. Or when Brian posted a birthday celebration I hadn't been invited to. But then I'd remind myself it's okay to grieve what you gave without apology. It's okay to miss people and still choose yourself. At the law firm, Frank began inviting me to lunch more often. We didn't talk about Rachel or the past. We talked about hiking trails, retirement dreams, books we'd loved and forgotten. One afternoon, while we sipped iced tea in the break room, he looked at me and said, "You're not the same woman who walked into this office a few months ago." And he was right. I wasn't. I wasn't the woman who jumped at every call. I wasn't the mother who poured out every drop of herself to be tolerated. I wasn't the invisible foundation propping up other people's dreams. I was becoming someone else. Someone who didn't feel the need to explain her worth. Someone who could say no without explanation. Someone who could say yes to herself without guilt. One night, as I folded laundry in the quiet of my living room, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked tired, but not in the way I used to. It wasn't exhaustion from overgiving. It was the softness that comes from healing. I don't know what comes next. I'm not chasing reconciliation. I'm not waiting for apologies. I'm just living, fully, quietly, authentically. Because being a mother is part of who I am, but it's not all I am. And I refuse to forget myself again. It's funny, no one ever tells you that love can coexist with limits. For most of my life, I thought real love meant saying yes. Saying yes even when you were tired. Even when it hurt. Even when no one said thank you. I wore my willingness like armor, convinced it made me strong. But it didn't protect me. It erased me. Drawing a boundary with Rachel and Brian wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a quiet series of decisions. I stopped replying immediately. I let calls go to voicemail. I learned to live with the discomfort of not fixing everything. It wasn't easy. There were days I felt like I was abandoning them. That old voice in my head would whisper, "What if they need you? What if this ruins everything?" But over time, another voice emerged, calmer, clearer. What if they only loved you for what you gave? What if not saying no is what ruined everything in the first place? One afternoon, I ran into Brian at the grocery store. We hadn't spoken since that night in my living room. He looked uncomfortable, awkward, unsure of what to say. I nodded politely. He mumbled something about the weather, about work. But we didn't speak of the wedding. Or Rachel. Or me. And strangely, that was okay. Because I didn't need closure tied in a bow. I didn't need him to admit I was right. I just needed to know that I could survive the silence. Later that evening, I sat on my back porch with a blanket around my shoulders, the sky soft with dusk. A friend from pottery class had invited me to a local art exhibit the next day, and I was thinking about going. Not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. And that feeling, that small, steady desire to show up for myself, was a revelation. In the past, I might have canceled if Rachel had called, or skipped it if Brian needed something. But now I understood the power of the word no, not as rejection, but as protection. Frank once said something over lunch that stuck with me. People will often confuse your boundaries with punishment, especially if they benefited from your lack of them. He was right. Rachel hadn't been angry because I hurt her. She was angry because I stopped enabling the version of love she was comfortable with. And that version, it came at my expense. So now I set my boundaries like fences, not to keep people out, but to protect the peace I fought to rebuild. If someone wants to come closer, they'll knock. And if they don't, well, I've learned to live with the quiet. And in that quiet, I'm finally whole. A few months have passed since everything changed. Since the email. Since the cancellation. Since the moment I realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation for finally choosing myself. And life. It's simpler now. Quieter, yes, but fuller too. I've stopped measuring my worth by how much I give. I no longer keep a mental list of who needs what, who's expecting a reply, who might be disappointed in me if I don't show up one more time. Instead, I wake up in the mornings and ask one question: what would make me feel whole today? Some days it's as small as taking a walk around the lake by my house with a warm cup of coffee in hand. Other days it's getting lost in a novel from the used bookstore downtown. And sometimes it's just sitting with myself. No noise, no plans, no obligations. I still see people, of course. I've built a small but steady circle of women my age who, like me, have learned the hard way that boundaries are a form of love, not defiance. We share meals without expectation. We talk about things that matter. Not once has any of them asked me for money or guilted me for putting myself first. There's a kind of magic in that, being seen not for what you do, but for who you are. As for Rachel, she hasn't reached out again. Not since that final email, the one I archived without replying. Brian texted me once on my birthday. A single sentence. Hope you're well. I didn't respond, not out of anger, just because I didn't feel like I owed it. It's not about punishment, it never was. It's about balance. For years, I gave and gave until there was nothing left for me, and they never noticed. Not because they were cruel, but because I trained them to believe my love was infinite, my resources endless, my presence guaranteed. But I'm not infinite, and I'm not guaranteed. And now I live in a world where I matter to me. It's hard to describe the peace that comes with that shift. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It just fills the empty corners of your life until one day you look around and realize you're not waiting to be appreciated anymore. You are already enough. So to the women watching this who've spent years being everything to everyone, please hear me. You don't have to wait for permission to take up space in your own life. You don't have to justify your boundaries. You don't have to sacrifice yourself just to feel worthy. Sometimes the most radical act of love is coming home to yourself.